Welcome to the Cycle Coach Show.
Empowering conversations on menstrual cycle coaching.
We're your hosts, Claire Baker
and Lauren Olivia Hughes.
Hello, you've got Claire here and our latest episode. Thanks so much for joining us. We could not be more thrilled to introduce our next guest duo. Today we have Nat Daudet and Natalie Martin joining us, and Lauren's taking the reins again to have this really interesting conversation. And it's a conversation I think that the menstrual cycle coaching world really needs to have. Let me tell you a little bit about our guests first. So Nat Daudet is a certified fertility awareness educator. She's a social worker, a menstrual cycle coach who specializes in teaching people how to chart their cycles as birth control. You might know her through her platform, the Fertility Awareness Project, on Instagram and on the web. And she brings her passion for coaching on irregular cycles and business and money and more. We also then have Natalie Martin. Yes, we have two Nats. Nat is a menstrual cycle coach. She's a writer, an author, and a yoga teacher, and she helps women find true cyclical alignment by embracing their unique cycles, what's really happening for them, rather than following rigid frameworks. And Nat integrates pleasure and embodiment and sensuality into her work, linking these dimensions with menstruality to really help women thrive. Now, the reason why I invited both Nats on the show today is because I really want to have a conversation that I think the menstrual cycle coaching industry needs to have. And this is around the myth of the perfect cycle, and that our goal is to try to get our clients to a place where their cycle is, inverted commas, perfected. So something that I often hear from trainee coaches or facilitators early on in their space holding journey is this fear of being an imposter if their menstrual cycle does not follow a 28-day pattern, if they still experience some period pain, for example, or premenstrual symptoms. And this really breaks my heart because we need to make more room for different kinds of cyclic experiences. And while it's important to talk about what is, again, inverted commas, normal and healthy in a menstrual cycle, I fear that we can step into the territory of trying to squeeze ourselves into boxes, and rather than celebrating the uniqueness of our cyclic experiences. So Nat Daudet has a lot of experience with longer cycles and irregular cycles, while Nat Martin has most recently not bled for the last 2 years while being pregnant and then postpartum. And they've shared with me at times that they've both felt disconnected from MCA, and they talk about this in the episode as well. And it's really great to hear how this has impacted their work as facilitators. And this is what I hope, is that those facilitators out there listening, or aspiring menstrual cycle coaches, people working in the field, can really trust that their cyclic experience has so much to teach them, and no matter what it looks like, and that we don't need to have these flawless cyclic experiences that follow the very archetypal pattern in order to hold space for others. So Nat and Nat really open up about their personal experiences, the ups and downs of their menstrual journeys. And if there's one thing that you take away from this episode, I hope it is that perfection is not the goal. It's about authenticity. It's about aliveness and creating a sense of belonging in our lives and in our bodies, embracing our real lived experiences. And I hope that we can make more room for these kinds of conversations in the menstrual cycle coaching industry. So enjoy this one. And if you would like to connect with both Nats, please find Natalie Martin at nataliekmartin.com or on Instagram at natalie.kmartin. And you can find Nat Daudet at fertilityawarenessproject.ca or on Instagram at fertilityawarenessproject.
Welcome to the Cycle Coach Show. Today you have me, Lauren, on my own because I get to interview what I would like to call is like Nat squared, or the two Nats of Cycle Coach School. I have Natalie Daudet, who's the Fertility Awareness Project. She's like our fertility awareness educator extraordinaire. She's also one of our mentors at Cycle Coach School. And then I have Nat Martin as well on the call. And she is a menstrual cycle educator and mentor and yoga instructor, and also mentor at Cycle Coach School. So I'm very excited to have the two of them here for a conversation on the myth, the elusive, perfect cycles. Welcome, both Nats.
Hi. Hi, Lauren.
Right. Before we get into today's podcast topic, I would love to start and do a little cycle check-in with the two of you. So maybe Nat Daudet, what cycle day are you on today?
Well, this is kind of perfect because guess what kind of cycle I'm in right now? A long cycle. So I'm on day 49. I did ovulate. I'm just looking at my cycle chart right now. But yeah, I'm in like my deep luteal phase, my deep premenstruum, very, very ready to bleed in this longer cycle. And I know it's around the corner. But yeah, this summer has been so unbelievably like hectic in so many ways, like so typical Saturn return, all the things. So just a lot of travel, a lot of babies being born, a lot of just life things. And so, yeah, it's really put me in a longer cycle. But it means that I'm very ready to talk about this topic. I'm excited because it feels like I'm having that lived experience right now. And I'm also extremely ready to bleed at this point.
Yes, I feel that on a deep level. Fellow premenstrual cycle person right now. Nat Martin, how are you feeling today? What cycle day are you on?
I'm on day 12 today. Actually, I feel like I'm on day 12. My inner springs have, since my cycle returned probably about 4 cycles ago now, my inner springs have felt pretty challenging, actually. A lot of premenstrual energy, but in the inner spring. But today we just got back from the lake. It's been really nice and warm here. And despite like ground level tiredness from just screaming baby at night, I actually do feel quite spring-like inside. Like I can feel that optimism and slight risk taking of reaching out to people for things and, you know, just doing things that I normally wouldn't do. So I actually feel pretty good, pretty balanced, pretty like strong physically. Yeah. Not ready for autumn, like the outside autumn. I can feel it coming. It's very strange to be in the inner spring, but to really feel that like autumnal energy that's there right now. It was really cold when we woke up this morning. So yeah, it's interesting being in my inner spring today.
And did Germany ever get summer this year? Or is it like...
Germany had an amazing summer from July. It's like 29 degrees, 30 degrees every day. But we missed half of it. We're in England and there was no summer there. So we've been making up for it since we got back. Yeah.
It's been a very Scottish summer. And they're like, this is just summer now. And I'm like, it's not. I promise. I've been here for hotter summers. So I feel that not ready for autumn. And we will get into this a bit more, but I should just mention that you kind of touched on your cycle returning, and that's because you just had a baby. And so I can't wait to get into that topic. I'm cycle day 25. And so definitely feeling like in the next couple days, I'll just cross over myself into the inner winter. I'll be curious to see. Yeah, my bleed's coming this weekend, but I'm kind of just ready to wrap it up, throw in the towel. I feel like I've done enough this cycle, and my I'm starting to notice I'm like needing more naps during the day. And just like, yeah, that sleep schedule has extended, which, yeah, I'm going to take advantage of while I have no children, because I've heard sleep exits your life. So embracing this season, definitely. From here, I would love to hear a bit more about both of your journeys to the cycle coach school, how you got into the modality of the menstrual cycle world, and a bit about your experiences with the long cycles, because we've kind of touched on both of them. But I would just love to hear, how this all started for you. So maybe we'll once again start with Nat Daudet.
Sure, yeah. I feel like I was introduced to menstrual cycle awareness through Claire. And even before I started like really diving into fertility awareness, I was charting my cycle with like a menstrual cycle dial and writing down words for how I felt each day and being really aware of when I was going to be starting my period. And I've always just loved getting my bleed. And I've always, when I was around the age of menarche, I was like praying to get my period. And I've always just been fascinated by moon cycles and menstruation. And so when I discovered that like you could track how you felt throughout the cycle, that was kind of what came first for me. And then like beyond just, drawing a red circle on my calendar, it was like tuning into how I felt throughout the cycle. And when I discovered Claire's work, I was really struggling with my premenstrual phase, as many of us do, and found that it really initiated me into like connecting with my wise wild woman and that archetype in the premenstruum. And then kind of simultaneously started charting my cycle for birth control with fertility awareness, and just found that the two of those things are so powerful to like actually, know when you ovulate and like hone in even more the phases of your cycle with the science and the spiritual, if you will. But I signed up for cycle coach school the same year as you, Nat, in 2020. And I was just really intrigued and curious. And it really set me on like a very personal journey in deepening my relationship with my menstrual cycle and all of its phases. But I think the biggest thing has really been like, coming back to these longer cycles and finding ways to continue to connect to myself, even when it doesn't have the typical 28-day rhythm. And I feel like, fertility awareness and menstrual cycle awareness have just always gone hand in hand for me. I'm always tracking my cycle obsessively, and I'm always really aware of how I feel and how that shifts throughout the cycle. So fertility awareness came into my life as really like birth control, and that was in 2017. And then I just kind of dove deep into that and trained as a fertility awareness educator and a menstrual cycle coach. And now my focus is really on fertility awareness, but the two, of course, are always mingling and connecting whenever I work with clients and when I sit down and look at my own cycle too.
Yeah, and this actually brings to mind something I'd love to hear about as well. And I remember you posting about this on Instagram, because with PCOS, as you said today, like you're in a longer cycle right now. And I remember you doing a post about, was it second spring or just like that elongated spring? Because when we're teaching menstrual cycle awareness, we talk about like the inner seasons and how they correlate to each phase of our menstrual cycle. But when you have PCOS, that like follicular phase can go on for what feels like maybe forever, which you could probably speak more about than I can. But I would love to hear about how you kind of came up with that analogy, I suppose, of that secondary spring experience.
Yeah, the second spring, or like the fifth phase of the cycle, is something that made sense to me and came to me when I was taking cycle coach. And in a longer cycle, I feel like there's this time between, once you kind of realize that you're maybe in a longer cycle. So I don't know, like day 20 and you haven't, ovulated yet, if you're tracking ovulation. There's this like shift into the fifth phase of the cycle, or this extended spring, where ovulation could happen at any time. You're in this like really delayed spring, and it has its own character, it has its own archetype, and it has its own flavor. It's almost like how I imagine menopause sometimes, where there isn't a lot of change from day to day. There's a lot of sameness. And maybe there's some wisdom in that. Like, like once you get into menopause, there is this like return to childlike wonder and magic and like this real stability. But I feel that in the extended spring. And then some of the shadows are just like frustration and feeling really, really ready to bleed and feeling really ready to transition and struggling to kind of anchor into any outer or inner season or rhythm. And I feel like all of those things I've experienced in the extended spring. A lot of cycle coaches will say like connect to the phases of the moon. And I've never found that to be super helpful for me. I think because it feels so samey from day to day, like it doesn't feel like I'm in a cycle within a cycle. It just feels like its own phase. It feels like very, samey, or just like this kind of like anticipation that you're always feeling to move on to the next, but you really don't know when it's going to happen. So that phase of the cycle, the extended spring is probably from like later spring until when you eventually do ovulate and enter the summer phase of the cycle, which could be any length of time. I had a cycle a few years ago that was like 15 months long. So it's like it could be months long. When you're postpartum, it could be so long, or it could be like a couple weeks. But yeah, it's just helped me to kind of like still connect and feel like I'm practicing MCA, or like still feel like I'm rooted in something, even when things feel very like up in the air and ambiguous.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It feels almost like an ellipses of like spring, ...
Totally.
Yeah. Until you finally ovulate. And you're like, oh, that's incredible. And then Nat Martin, I would love to hear about your story and how you came to this field as well. Because we were all in the 2020 class, which feels wild to think about. Look at us now.
It's like sorority sisters.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of crossover, I guess, with Nats, except mine, I feel like it's perhaps the other way around. So I came off the pill in 2015, didn't know anything about the menstrual cycle at all. And so I first got introduced by a fertility awareness method and was just blown away by, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. How did I not know this? My body is, this amazing thing. And was really diligently tracking my cycle and have been tracking since then. And then just started to kind of realize like, I feel different now. I was on the pill for 17 years. So, it was, although the fertility awareness stuff was very good at explaining what was happening in my cycle from a fertility perspective, there wasn't really anything explaining what was happening like with me. And I don't even know how I first, I think I heard something about like, having your period with the new moon, ovulating with the full moon on Instagram, and my cycles were the opposite way around. And so I was quite intrigued, like, what did that mean? And I also started, I started reading Red Moon by Miranda Gray, and then started trying to use that wheel tracker and just got so confused. I was like, I don't know where the moon goes. And just, it didn't work for me at all. Yeah, just kept coming across people. I came across Claire via Vienda Maria and the Heartful Biz. And Claire, I was following her, but I never really, I was really just all about Vienda at that time. She was my mentor. I was really into her blogs and everything that she was putting out. And we worked together. I put together a yoga workshop, which Claire came to after I'd posted it in the Heartful Biz. And that's really how Claire and I connected. And then I saw literally about a day or two after that workshop that she had this cycle coach school going on, and the cohort was about to close, and I was like, oh my god, this is like, what is that, cycle coach? I watched her intro video about it and was just like, yes, that is me, because I was so blown away by the fertility aspect of things. I kept telling my friends about it, I kept speaking about it, and people were asking me for advice, but I'm still not a trained fertility awareness educator. And I just kind of was like, this is so cool, but I had no idea that it could be like a thing that like, it just blew me away. So that's how I got into it. And when I started tracking my cycle from a menstrual cycle awareness perspective, it was very clear to me that my cycle was flipped. And actually, it was my boyfriend who noticed that I had this like mid-cycle dip where I would just be very like floppy and unhappy and moody, and probably how most people felt while they were having their period. But just I had it in the middle of my cycle. And he mentioned that to me and I was like, what are you talking about? That's crazy. And yeah, it turned out that my ovulations were really rough, whereas my bleeds felt really good. And so for me, the work was really like, okay, how do I balance that out? How do I apply menstrual cycle awareness and live cyclically instead of just living the way that I was living because my period didn't disturb me? So that's kind of, it was a little bit perhaps backwards that menstrual cycle awareness came much later, as opposed to how it did for Nat. And I was really tracking my signal from both aspects very diligently and got pregnant. Then it was just like gone. I had to laugh when Nat spoke about the lunar cycle because I used to be able to connect to it, but as soon as I got pregnant, that was it. It just disappeared. And so now I think this is my fourth cycle, I think, fourth, maybe fifth. And I feel like I'm starting from the beginning again because now I'm really diligently tracking my fertility cycle, but I'm still trying to figure out a way to make my menstrual cycle awareness tracking work for me now, given the way that my life looks, not having all the time and the space that I had before. So just while Nat was speaking, I was like, gosh, it feels like I've kind of come full circle and I'm now figuring out like what kind of tracker do I like to use again? And, how do I feel in each season? Because my cycle is very different to what it was before.
Absolutely. It's interesting. We've all had issues with the lunar cycle or just, sticky relationships with it. Claire and I mentioned on a previous podcast episode talking about how sometimes people are like, oh, I have to ovulate with the full moon. I have to bleed with the new moon. And there's like the pressure to like somehow change your cycle or to like cycle sync it with whatever's happening outside of you. And instead kind of bringing it back to like, well, what are you actually feeling in this moment? Like what is happening for you, even though there are these other cycles happening around us. And I would love to hear your experience, whether it's like in these mentoring pods that you hold as part of Cycle Coach School, or just in your one-on-one clients, like how do you broach this conversation around the quote unquote perfect cycle that sometimes we as women strive for, even though maybe we shouldn't?
One thing I can definitely say, I'd never really put two and two together until just now when you were saying that. But for me, I didn't want to bleed with the new moon. I loved that I bled with the full moon and what it supposedly meant. And, because I never really felt that maternal. And I had read that, if you're bleeding with the new moon, it's like you're very maternal and all this kind of thing. And if you're bleeding with the full moon, you're more, shamanic and you're here to like do this deep inner work. And I was like, yes, that's me. And I was really happy to not bleed with the new moon. And now, like, I got pregnant and my connection to it literally overnight went. So that's it's very interesting. And perhaps it would be interesting for me to dig a little bit deeper into, like, why that is. Interesting. But there's just wanted to share that little piece.
I think too about just like how I think all of us have had this experience going through Cycle Coach School where we went in thinking it was about this like Instagrammable like connection you have to your period and your cycle is going to be perfect and you're going to have all these rituals that are going to last a week long and you're going to times that by 4. And like I think we've all kind of gone through this like full circle where we're now like, no, it's about real life. And like real life is not this like what we think of on Instagram or Pinterest or whatever. It's real life, and we all have messy lives and we all have messy cycles from time to time. And like that's more common than this like perfect 28-day cycle or whatever. It's just about like a deeper connection to yourself and to your life. And like you said, Lauren, like what's happening every day and how you feel, and having this connection to yourself and this portal into connecting to yourself. It's really more about that than like, how your cycle looks. And I think I think so much too about like my own relationship with this has come through like wellness culture as well, and like less so in the menstrual cycle coaching space, but like really in the hormone healing space. There's this like narrative around having a perfect cycle, and if you don't, it's a personal failing, or it's something that you've done, or something you haven't healed spiritually in yourself that means that your cycle is not regular. I think that's such bullshit. Like, I just really do. Like, I don't know. If it were that easy, then we'd all have healed our cycles already. Like, it just isn't so simple. And I think that's a cop out for like actually relating to your cycle as it is. And that's what cycle coaching has given me. It's just like this self-acceptance and like having this relationship to my cycle, even when it doesn't look perfect. And then you start looking around and you're like, wow, nobody's cycle is perfect. And it's not really about that. But I feel like wellness culture, and specifically like online wellness culture, it's just like really done a number on like, this like guilt that we feel around doing certain things or like eating certain foods, so that we avoid having hormone imbalance. And obviously there's science behind that, and like a lot of, documented stuff behind that, anecdotal stuff. But I think it's more complex than that. And personally, I just try to like have some self-acceptance, because I think a lot of that stuff can like cause more stress and lead to more like cycle imbalance, really, like more hormonal imbalance. So I just appreciate the menstrual cycle coaching space so much, because I see that in myself and with my own clients. And it's really about acceptance from what I've experienced.
Yeah, I would say the same. And I think, to answer your question, Lauren, most of the people that I've worked with have had cycles that are the opposite to what they're quote unquote supposed to have. And I mean, it makes sense that that's the reason why they've come to me, because obviously that's been my experience as well. And that's from clients who have found me like by myself or through my own work, and also people who I've worked with after cycle coach who were in my mentoring pods. And it is that kind of, as Nat was just saying, it's about acceptance. Actually, it's about like accepting that your cycle is the way it is. It doesn't mean that you can't work on it, but it's this like, stop trying to fit yourself as a square peg into a round hole, because you've read that your inner spring should look like this and your summer should look like that. And actually, like doing this whole cycle syncing thing that people want to do and get it right, you can't do that if you're cycle syncing to someone else's cycle. That's something that I say constantly. It's like you have to look at what's happening in your own cycle and then adjust accordingly. So this idea of the perfect cycle, when I'm working with people, it's like, well, it's kind of like you almost have to forget what you've learned, because what you've learned is a perfect cycle. You have to learn something as the basis. And now it's kind of like time to rip it up, throw it away, and almost forget what you know and look at what's happening in your cycle with fresh eyes and a fresh perspective.
And sometimes I think, especially in like that online wellness community that we're talking about, there is that inclination to hyper focus on the shiny, happy, positive side of every phase. And even in cycle coach school, I think of like, obviously we teach the frameworks of like how each phase should feel, but there is like the joys and then there's the shadows. And I think a lot of us, or I mean, I don't want to say us, because I hope that like, I know we're different, but some of this wellness talk is like so focused on just the joys of like, this is like your perfect ovulation season. And you're like, sounds like very tiring sometimes. Like sometimes I'm just like, I showered today and like, check, I'm ovulating. Like, well done me. The kind of like I love what you said that about like stripping back to be like, okay, I've learned like how it could look. And now there's like that curiosity and that wonder of what does my cycle actually look like now that I have the language to use and the information to like share with my loved ones or with my coach if I'm working one-on-one with someone.
Yeah, I think it's a personality thing as well. I am really annoying in that way that it's one thing I'm so grateful for in Cycle Coach in our cohort. I remember just sitting in one of our sessions and being like, I actually don't want to be here right now. I feel like shit. And I've got my hoodie up and I don't want to take part. And I remember saying that in the session and feeling like, I don't know if I can say this. And Claire was just like, that's okay. And, so I feel like it's also maybe a personality thing of like, yes, you can strive for perfection, but also, at least for me, I am someone who just is a bit of a devil's advocate and does kind of say but, and I can't really fake it in a way. So it's great when things do work in the cycle and you do have like ovulations that feel like, yay, this is amazing. It's how it's supposed to feel. But also it's fine to just be like, I feel like utter crap. And that's also okay. Like we're not just supposed to be shiny, happy people all the time.
Yeah. There's also so much expectation pressure on women. And like, I feel like sometimes there's this conflict that we can create in ourselves when we have this, when we look at the expected or the perfect and we're striving for it. And we create even more just like conflict in our own lives when our cycle doesn't look like that and we are going for this perfect thing. And I really do think like, I think this like going back to the online wellness space, but I think it really does like add to the burden of like women's guilt and being a certain way or like having a certain cycle. And I just like really don't love that. And I really like try to fight against that because we have enough things, and like probably in motherhood too, there's like a whole other can of worms that like we have enough things that we're not doing right. So like, can we just like set that down and like enter into spaces where like we're okay as we are and like we can just show up as we are? And I feel like our pods and I feel like group calls in Cycle Coach School are perfect examples of that, where it is just like, yeah, let's like put that down and just we can literally show up as ourselves.
Yeah, and I think also people just take things too literally sometimes. It's like there has to be a framework for you to learn, and it just so happens that the framework that was put down first is spring feels like that, summer feels like that. And yes, there are people who do have that, but there are also many people who don't. And I do wonder if someone else had come up with that model and had a different interpretation of it, whether we would all be trying to align ourselves to that. I think like some people just, they find something, they latch onto it, it makes theoretical sense. And then it's just this, I have to follow it to the letter instead of trusting myself or being curious enough or feeling safe enough or whatever it is to find out, like, is there another model? Because we know, like, Lauren, you're sitting up in Scotland, summer, is it? It's not wrong. It sucks maybe, but it's also just a truth, right? Yeah. So it's summer there is not like summer here, and that's okay because it's a different part of the world. And the cycles, I think, are the same.
And I always tell my clients too, it's like, your cycle is regular until it isn't. I feel like maybe a man came up with the 28-day cycle thing because like any woman who charts is like, dang girl, any woman who charts, any menstruator who charts is like, you have 11 regular cycles and then the 12th is always going to throw you for a loop. Like it's regular until it isn't. So always always be aware of that. Like don't fall into this like thing where you're like, ovulation's going to happen on day 14 because it doesn't always.
Yeah, if one more app tells me I'm ovulating, like, please get out of my life. Yeah. And it's so interesting because I was literally just talking about this with a client of like how this space, and I wonder if the two of you have noticed this too, since we started in 2020, or obviously your journey started before then, but in Cycle Coach School in 2020, I felt like it was such like a new market, and now it's kind of floated online, and I feel like it's kind of swung to a very masculine place, which is the masculine can be healthy, but I just with the cycle syncing and like this is what you should do each week differently than the other week, and like if you're not feeling this well, like take these supplements, like, or do you drinking matcha? And I'm like, I don't like matcha. Please don't make me drink matcha.
What are you talking about, Lauren? You're wrong. Just kidding. It's so good.
It just tastes like grass.
It does.
I don't want to drink it anymore.
I don't like it either. So
Okay.
we have one matcha crew here. Yes.
But it can be very defeating and exhausting as a woman, because you've just touched on this, like it's hard being a woman, and it can feel like you're failing a lot. And even like from speaking for myself, like I suffer from hormonal acne, and as a cycle coach sometimes I'm like, well, clearly I'm doing something wrong. It's like, nope, just some people genetically like have hormonal acne, and like, yes, I can like probably do crazy things, and I've tried a lot of things, but it's just like that external stress probably does more harm than actually just existing and drinking enough water.
Yes to that.
Yeah.
Hydrate.
Yeah. And I've wondered that about the masculine energy as well, because I kind of realized, like, you know, especially when you're thinking about inner summer and how we're supposed to be at our most productive and all of this. And I do get it, but I just kind of felt like, but hang on a minute, when it's a summer's day like today, I haven't even checked my emails. Like, I don't want to. I want to go and chill out, but I can read and sleep and eat grapes. And, you know, I don't really want to be like busy. And I do think that, you know, as you are right, like it has blown up since 2020 in a big way, which is on one hand fantastic, because it means the conversation's there. But on the other hand, I think it's I'm seeing a lot of ads in my Instagram feed for like to become a cycle coach for like €10 or something ridiculous like that. And it's this kind of like commodification of it. And of course, it's easier when you can market something as perfect, get the perfect body, have the perfect relationship, have the perfect cycle. And it's something that I think when you look at people who've been doing this a long time, that is not there. That it's not about that promise, because that's not the point. The promise is that you get to know yourself better, and this perfect cycle does not exist. It's just your cycle that you work with. And I think, as soon as something does become good for business, I mean, I'm also a yoga teacher, so I've seen it happen in the yoga industry as well. It's less about substance, perhaps, and more, or less about the journey and more about like this perfect outcome, having the perfect whatever it is. So it's a double-edged sword, because I see it and I'm like, oh my God, it's getting big, especially on TikTok. It's like cycle syncing in this way, and I'm like, that sounds terrible. Like, you know, I also don't want to drink matcha. Also being part of Cycle Coach School and, you know, being part of this, bringing new cycle coaches out there. And so for me, I'm like, at least very thankful that I've been to a school and am part of a school that teaches things in a more slow, self-inquiry kind of way, as opposed to like, this is what it should look like, now go out and teach this to people and get rich quick kind of. Because there is no perfect. And people don't usually want to hear that.
I know. It's like striving for perfection constantly. It's never the ideal. And I would be curious to hear your experiences as like someone with PCOS and someone who has recently been pregnant and breastfeeding and like missing their cycle. How has it been coaching in the cycle space with maybe an irregular cycle and holding space for people who might have the quote unquote normal 28-day range of cycles?
I've actually said this in like group calls in Cycle Coach, where I felt like really outside of MCA when I'm in an irregular cycle or long cycle. Like I feel like I don't belong. And I've had that feeling in spaces, but I know that that's not necessarily, like, I know that's not actually true. It's just like an inner critic voice, or just like a voice in my head that's like, can't always relate to some aspects of MCA. I mean, I'm sure we've all had that. And so I'm not like unique in saying that, but I think having that experience is then such a gift, because like, I feel like I can relate to all of the things that we're talking about. And it's a space that I'm very comfortable in. Like being in a long cycle or being in a regular cycle is so familiar to me that I feel like it is a gift when I work with a client who maybe has like, a longer cycle or is like experiencing stress and is as really kind of wondering what to do and how to go about it. It just feels so comfortable to me to be like, you know what, like nothing's wrong. Like I'm not going to go and like recommend all these things for you. Like let's just like meet you where you're at and like talk about how you can navigate this today and tomorrow and the next day and talk about how you can like manage some of the fears that come up and some of the kind of concerns I guess you can have when you're like, I don't know when I'm going to ovulate. And also recognizing this perfection or recognizing this, like maybe you need to take a break from charting or like maybe it'd be healthy to like step back from it if it's causing you more stress. And that's kind of what I always come back to is like, if it's not helpful, then we need to reevaluate. So I'm always thinking like that when I'm working with clients or working with anybody who has an irregular cycle. And I also can relate to just this feeling of not belonging and then also feeling very welcome in cycle coach school for like how I am. And there's this sense of belonging and this sense of like awareness that like I can be as I am.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I can very much relate to the feeling of being outside of MCA. Yeah, it was a very strange thing to suddenly just not have a cycle anymore. And I literally felt it stop on day 18 as I wrote to Claire in Slack. And I didn't know I was pregnant at that time, obviously, but I felt that like my cycle wasn't there anymore. And it's been an interesting one to navigate because I don't work with people who have irregular cycles. It's not that I say no to them. They just don't come to me because it's not been my experience. So everyone that I've worked with has had maybe not like a perfectly regular cycle, but definitely not irregular by any means. And so on one hand, it's been fine because I know the theory of menstrual cycle awareness. And anyway, as we've just been speaking about at length, it's not about what their cycle should look like. It's always starting from where they're at. So from that point of view, it's been quite fine. It's been very normal, let's say. But I think for me personally, how it's been to coach has been very different because like I really try to always feel what it is that I'm either teaching or sharing or what someone else is sharing with me. So if I'm working with someone and they're in their premenstrual phase, even if I'm not in my premenstrual phase, I really try to feel like with their check-in and what they're saying, what's happening. I'm very, very big on embodiment in that way. And so that's been very strange because it's almost like there was an amnesia. Like what does it feel like? I can't really quite remember like what it felt like. And, obviously it was like 23 months or so. And it's like something about 2 years almost without a cycle. And it was just like, what about like, I've forgotten what that feels like in the body. And so there was definitely some inner critic and imposter syndrome, although logically I knew pregnancy and postpartum is a cycle all of its own, which is probably why I felt quite happy to just stop tracking and stop trying to hold on to the MCA world in that way. But it definitely made coaching something that I had to just try and approach in a slightly different way because the mechanism that I always relied on before just simply wasn't there anymore. And aside from that, also having a massive identity crisis because it's so wild to be in that transition of maiden to mother, like literally, and to see it happening and to know that actually this is a really long transition and I am still in it. And there are times I feel very sure about who I am and what I'm doing and how I'm coaching. And there are times when I really don't. And, I shared with Claire in our listening partnership a couple of days ago, I was just like, I feel like I'm in a washing machine. And I'm on the like mixed identity cycle. I have no idea. And so that that having those kinds of feelings and trying to still be present and hold the space for people whilst feeling like I don't even know what MCA is anymore because I wasn't in it for such a long time. That's been what's different. And I must say, when my cycle came back, it wasn't immediate like, oh, I remember. But now that my cycle has changed so much from how it was before, again, it's that like embodied learning that the way that I approach coaching has just shifted slightly. So it's interesting that point of view. Like the theory stays the same, right? Like that's fine, but I guess it depends on how you work with people. And for me, it is very much that like I feel it, I connect from that place, and then I can kind of hold that space, and that's been really, really interesting, challenging at times. It's a wild thing to experience, and I think that, you know, like Nat, when you were speaking, I had such a sense of, you know, like you've been there before, you're so used to it, so for you it's like, okay, this is how it is, and you can really hold that space for people. And whereas for me, obviously just being pregnant and postpartum, it, and from having a very regular cycle, it was just suddenly like, whoa, what's happening? So it was really, it felt really nice and soothing to hear you speak from that, like, yeah, I got this. Like, I know what it's like. And I feel like I'm in that kind of place now of finding my feet in a way so that I can also have that, like, it's okay, I understand what's happening. Probably it will take until my son's about 10 years old. But at some point, I guess I'll also be able to have that level of just like, it's okay because you've been in it and you've embodied it for so long. And yeah. So it's been interesting for sure.
Yeah, and there's so much nuance to like even the term of like perfect cycle, right? Because we're touching on PCOS and on pregnancy, but then even if like you think like I have a 28-day cycle every month until I die, it's like every cycle is going to be different. Like there's never going to be like a happy glowy unicorn. Like you might have one unicorn cycle and be like, I am the queen of every archetype that I ever wanted to be. And then there'll be one where you're just like, I feel like I'm a sloth all month long. And so being able to hold those containers and to like teach like the students at Cycle Coach School, or just like our clients, like how to hold space for themselves or their future clients, on how to kind of like flow or shift with the hormonal ride that we're all on over our life cycle.
I mean, it's a question that comes up every year, isn't it? With the students in our pods. I mean, I can speak for myself. I don't know about the others because I'm not in their pods, but the question that comes up always is like, yeah, but how do I work with someone who is perimenopause, or if I'm not, or how do I work with someone who has PCOS, or how do I, you know, and it is that kind of like, the theory is there. And the point is that you're not trying to have a perfect cycle. So theoretically, we can work with anybody. Like I could work with someone with PCOS because I have the ground level knowledge, and it's not about a perfect cycle. But of course, there is also this piece about being able to, I guess, put yourself a little bit in their shoes, or to, you know, to really kind of take, to really be able to hear what they're saying, which is where the coaching part comes in, and being able to kind of find that kernel that you can then go with. You don't have to necessarily be 100% identifiable with someone in order to be able to coach them. We would have a very narrow group of people to work with. In that case,
I get a lot of that too in the pod, Nat. I also tend to attract a lot of perfectionists as clients. I wonder why.
Virgo.
But I tend to attract a lot of perfectionists and a lot of people who do not have regular cycles. So like attracts like, it's true. But I think that cycle coaching really brings people to this, like, okay, you know, you're seeing this imperfection in your face. Even if you have, like you said, Lauren, even if you have a 28-day cycle, it's not going to be the same every cycle. And you can always look for something, if you're looking for it, that isn't quite right, or that you want to change, or that doesn't fit. And so I think with coaching clients who have irregular cycles, it's really coming back to that, like, yeah, self-knowing, self-acceptance of having this kind of peace when things are not perfect. And that is hard to do. And it takes practice. And I think this is just one way to practice that. And it's an opportunity to practice that and grow your capacity for living with and sitting with the unknown, or sitting with the imperfection, or things that are outside of your control. Like, it really does school you in that art. It really does. And I think that, yeah, with everybody that I work with, it does come back to that very, very often.
And almost shedding that like wellness of Instagram community of like, you don't actually need to know all the answers. Like, you can just hold space for someone to have like that self-exploration. Like, I don't have PCOS. I've never been pregnant. I'm not in perimenopause. Like, and yet I feel confident that I'd be able to like hold beautiful divine space for someone to like explore their own cycle. Like, I don't need to be that person being like, actually, this is what you're feeling, because I wouldn't know anyway. Even if I had that same experience, like, it wouldn't be the same.
Yeah, for sure.
To kind of tie this episode towards a close, I would love to hear what your advice to incoming students or recent graduates, what would be your advice to them on coaching these imperfect cycles, or just being able to hold space for people who have unique cycles?
Do you want to go first, Nat? We're both like,
Yeah. I
stroking
feel
our
like
imaginary beards.
I feel like this whole episode is a great starting point. I feel like listening to other people's experiences in your pods is a great way to practice this if you haven't experienced it yourself. You're always going to face working with people who you can't relate to, but you can, it sounds so cliche, but like, you can hold space and just listen and meet the frustration. Like, I think that's the thing for me that I keep running up against is this sense of frustration, and transforming that into acceptance. And I think that's what you can do as a coach is really be a space where you can keep, I feel like a broken record, bringing it up again and again and again in different spaces and cycle coach. But it's like, that's sometimes what you need to do is in the moment, if you're feeling really frustrated, if your client's feeling frustrated, it's just like allowing that to be there, and then going deeper from there. And yeah, you don't need to have all the answers. I would definitely say, like, someone who has a longer cycle and has for a long time has probably tried everything. So don't recommend anything without asking first. That's like my one pet peeve is like, yeah, I've literally had all the tests and tried everything. And for somebody who has a regular cycle, you might go, well, if you just try this, or if you just do that, like, but it's not that simple. It hasn't been for me. And so I think always asking before you make a recommendation, that's like a golden rule of cycle coaching. But I think I don't think it can be said enough that, like, anytime anybody is struggling with anything, you have no idea what they've tried or what they haven't tried. And I think making a space where someone can just like be frustrated, or just like have an off day, or just like, be at a loss. And I think holding space for that takes real skill. And I think anybody who's willing to do that can do that for somebody who has a longer cycle.
Yeah, I agree. On the other hand, because I can't help be that on the other hand person, I do also think there is a lot of merit in figuring out who you would like to work with. I don't call them client avatars anymore, because people have like a life cycle and things change. But I think, like in my case, I've worked with mostly people whose experiences have mirrored aspects of my own. And for me personally, I've really enjoyed that, because as I've said, like, I share from a very embodied place with everything that I do, and I coach from that place as well. So for me, it's I guess a piece of advice would be to think about who it is that you want to work with. And it doesn't mean that other people won't come to you, but it means that the people that you're speaking to are more likely to perhaps be people who come to you because they identify with your story. And so there is something to be said for being in a container with someone who you can have that shared identifiable piece with, whether it's the color of your skin or your gender or your postpartum or whatever it is. But I do agree that you can hold space for anyone when you learn how to do that, and when you're willing and to be open and to really listen. Because I think that's one of the things that also comes up quite a lot is like, what do I do next? Who do I like? How do I find my people? And I think that is something that actually, will change over time. Like my group of people has also changed over time, but I think that you can still hold a really lovely space for people, even if you can't necessarily identify with what it is that they're specifically going through. So yeah, that's something that I think is perhaps worth thinking about. But I do also think that when you're fresh out of learning this, like I didn't know who I wanted to work with when I was fresh out of cycle coach school, and I was very generic, and I had on my internet, it doesn't matter if you're menopausal, if you've just got your period, and of course you do. It also takes time. I think it's that patience piece, right? You can't rush it. It's patience. It's patience in your cycle, it's patience in waiting for your cycle to come back. If you're postpartum, for example, or if you've got irregular cycles, it is this thing of like, I'm in it and it feels uncomfortable and it's a bit messy and I don't know yet.
Yeah.
And being okay with that. And I think really that's, like you can't really force things.
No.
It will happen the way that it happens in its own time.
Such good advice, Nat.
Trusting your ability to hold that space. And I mean, I think we could probably all agree that a lot of women just need the hour carved out in their day to just talk out loud.
Yeah.
And the power of just
So
that.
true. So true.
And then experimenting, like you said, Nat, about like trying out so many different clients and not necessarily like pigeonholing yourself until you realize like what actually sparks, what actually resonates. And then, diving into that, but trusting your ability to hold space for people who don't look or have the exact same cycle as you. To end this episode, I'd love to ask a couple little questions that are just more fun. So first off, what book are you reading right now?
Bright Young Women. It's such a great premenstrual read. It's about it's kind of dark, but I love a dark read. It's about a serial killer in the 70s who went after sororities and women, and it's kind of following these two women who are impacted by him in different ways, and it's really well done. I'm loving it. It's also getting me really fired up.
Is it a fiction or non? Fiction or nonfiction?
It's like a what do you call it? Like a
historical fiction.
Historical fiction. Oh. Yeah.
Oh, I'll have to look that one up.
Wow.
It's great.
Dang. I can't read things like that anymore since.
But I did
actually.
Can I say one more thing? I did also recently read All Fours. Have either of you heard of it?
No.
Okay, it's this book that I didn't really know what I was getting into. It was the book that I just finished, but it's actually about perimenopause, and it's the most absurd sexual, kind of autobiography of this woman who's navigating perimenopause and is having this it is so amazing and so absurd, and it's so applicable to, I feel like, the menstrual cycle space too. It is, it's very kind of visceral and disturbing, but also talks about perimenopause in this really beautiful way. I don't know. It's hard to explain, but I also just finished that book.
I feel like I just heard Amy Poehler talk about this on a late night.
I heard it on a podcast as well. Yeah. And I was like, what is this book? And then I read it and I was like, oh my goodness, I did not know what I was getting myself into, but it's fascinating.
Check my library app after this.
Yeah. I'm not ahead of that. It sounds great. I am reading a less interesting book. I'm reading a book which is about emetophobia, which I have, fear of vomiting, and it's about CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and how it can help. So, I'm kind of just going through that and doing lots of journaling about it and things. So, yeah, not as thrilling,
But helpful,
equally-
probably.
but definitely helpful. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And what's a fun fact you've recently learned? Doesn't have to be MCA related. Just like what's something that this week, or this month has kind of surprised and delighted you?
I learned that, which totally makes sense to me as a mum now, but I learned that when you have a child, part of their DNA remains in your bloodstream for a few years and remains in your brain forever. And that made a lot of sense to me, as in, like, this is why I can't stop thinking about my child, even if he's in perfectly good hands and I'm like, very far away. Which also meant, when I thought about it, I was like, I said to my boyfriend, I was like, God, that means that I've got like a part of your DNA in my brain forever. And he was like, how do you feel about that? I was like, I don't know. So that was something that I learned, that I was like, wow, that's really cool. Really, really cool. And I guess just, reinforces the saying people say, like, really consider who you have children with, because you will have a piece of them with you forever.
Wow. Mine's kind of baby related too, because I've been in baby land. Like, not for me personally, but everyone around me. And I think it was Aviva Ram who posted that breastfeeding your baby for 1 day is equivalent to running 7 miles.
I can concur.
Which I can imagine. But it's like, breastfeeding women need to eat more. But it's probably so hard to do that. It just blew my mind.
It's not so hard.
Okay. I just imagine that thinking about eating and planning your meals, like I do so diligently now, would be really tough. But
yeah, definitely. On my side, there was bigger portions and a lot of just in between foods,
Constant snacks.
just constant snacks and constant drinks. At least for the first while, I was quite like, oh wow, that's crazy. I can definitely say that is true.
mothers are.
I read a stat that compared breastfeeding to like a full-time career, because it's like the same amount of hours that you'd put in, and that like financially they should be compensated. They'd make like
Absolutely.
hundreds of thousands of dollars if they were actually working that hard. It's like, I love women.
It's a lot of time.
Well, thank you both so much for dedicating some time across countries. We've got Canada, Germany, and Scotland representing. So thank you so much for being a part of this and for sharing your wisdom on perfect cycles and menstrual cycle coaching. And yes, if anyone does register this year, you might have one of the Nats as mentor. So that's something to look forward to. We'll see you guys in the school very soon. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Cycle Coach Show. If you loved what you heard, then please review, share, and subscribe to help us reach more cyclical listeners like you. You can find us on Instagram at Cycle Coach School or online at cyclecoachtraining.com.